So, you want to fully complete the map. You want to fight and fight until there are no more fights to do. I have only one question. Are you insane? It takes so bloody long. But well, I've done it 3 times, so I don't want you to spend so long doing this, and that's why I'm providing you some tips. I fought 1,220 battles and only fought personally 129, so a tenth, and that's already too many. But still, I've done this with Gorbad, with Malakai, with Mannfred. I should have screenshotted Mannfred as well. But I have a few tips for you who wish to pursue this idea. Now, notice that Gorbad took 300 turns while Malakai took 232. Why? Because dwarves are OP. Or maybe because actually I organized myself better. So let's get to the tips and let's see if I can help you organize yourselves better for this type of achievement, let's say. Tip 1. Instead of goals, check the climate. Check the map choke points. It's much better than just the typical goals. What do I mean by this? So let's say that we started just with Gorbad. I'm going to use Gorbad and Malakai a lot with the examples. If you check his short campaign victory, it's just nearby provinces and it should be fairly easy to do. And it's actually not hindering you from pursuing a full map victory. But the long campaign victory is different. It forces you to go against Reichland and Whistland and Nuln. So you just check the rewards to see if it is worth it, because sometimes it may not be worth it to follow that path. You may be just drawn into further wars. And another example here is with Malakai. So Malakai needs to complete 4 legendary battles, that's fine, and fight the Archeon and fight the Disciples of Ashut, so Ostrogoth. But that's pretty easy, it's pretty close by, and it would be all fun if you weren't drawn to fight Norska early on, which is completely to the other side. Even against your long campaign victory, you would have to focus Norska as well, because they won't leave you alone. So this is what I mean. Instead of goals and objectives, let's instead check the climate, check map choke points, and see if we can have a better way to go at this whole map domination, because you're not going to be worried too much about the short and long victory if your main goal is to conquer the full map. Climate. Here with Karl Franz, you can see an example of one of the worst climates types ever, because he has mountains as suitable, he has a lot of red land and yellow land, and it's not like it's impossible, but likely you would go towards the long campaign victory of having the whole of the empire. Similarly with Geld, you actually have much better climate and just some areas in red. So eventually, in the end, Geld would likely have more income, more armies, and it will be easier. This is not to say that some lords are better than others at this, they are, but you can always use the one you prefer. The idea is that you check the strengths, and sometimes climate may not be a strength of that lord. For example, for Gorbad, it is. It is a nice strength that he has good climates, so it is actually a very good one to do. Instead, let's talk about also choke points and maps. This is a nice example, a choke point where it's equal for everyone, like 3 settlements, up to 3 settlements. You can also do it like this, perhaps, so that you're gonna have maybe, 1-2 armies to defend that whole area. This is a better one, even. It's like they did it on purpose with the climate, so it's frozen on one side and it's chaos wasteland on the other, see? And it's like you conquered the Fortress of the Damned over there, or even these 2 bastions, the Shagrath and Shard Bastion, but maybe you conquered the Fortress of the Damned, you build a garrison there, and you can defend for quite a long while you focus on different places. Why? Because the next ground after this is Chaos Lands, and you may not have the same replenishment, it may not be as good. So use the choke points combined with the climate that you have and climate penalties to make sure that you're using it properly. Everyone knows about these forts from the Empire, right? They're natural choke points. But that doesn't mean that you should always go towards that. For example, in this Gorbad campaign, for a long time, my choke point was focusing differently. I wasn't going here. I decided maybe I don't need to conquer those places. I'll just use this area as a choke point. Sorry, wrong color. This area as a choke point, and it was much better. I didn't conquer Eikendorf until much later, and it was easier to do. Another time is when you have these choke points right in the open ground. It seems from above that this is open ground, but it isn't. It's very difficult to traverse without any underway stances or anything like that. They'll have to go by one of the bridges that are nearby Kemri, or even go through the sea, and you can see that happening, so it's much easier. And now, a further analysis of these open grounds is sometimes mountains are very tricky. You have all these pathing issues and everything like that. When I say pathing issues, I don't mean bugs. I mean the fact that you have to follow the path, and it's not always easy to go through those places. You can get ambushed, Skaven may be there, so you have to remember all of that. Remember, are you fighting Skaven? You gotta increase a little bit the armies that you're taking, maybe have some ambush defense chance there to avoid having unnecessary fights and issues while you're going for your goal. Just this area, it's so large, and it has so many paths of attacking. I think I'm going on 13 right now, that I actually consider the whole area with the mountains instead to be conquered. So instead of conquering just the land before, just the low part of the land before the river, I actually prefer to consider this land and the mountains as one. And then I'll have to consider just this choke point, here, this, which can be protected by the same, and then another one down south. So that's the sort of idea. Instead of conquering this area, think of conquering everything here and planning to do so. You should move from choke point to choke point. That's the idea. But when you pause for a break, what are you actually doing? You're deciding how many armies for those map areas. You're adapting to the enemy, and you're planning to avoid pockets. What I mean by pockets is when an ally or neutral faction is completely surrounded by yourself, by your full strength. So this is a rough estimate, really rough estimate. I just wanted to put something there so you guys would realize. So of course, 4+ armies to those places is mainly, when I say 4 armies, it's like 2 by 2. You bring 2 armies, they attack the same settlement, they bring another 2 armies, they attack the same settlement, and they go like this, and they'll, reinforce one another, and you'll have that possibility. But look at what I put in Cathay: 6+ armies, 8+ armies in the regions of the Chaos Dwarves and the mountains. Why? Because you're always in the middle of stuff. You'll always need to defend against someone. You'll always need to keep one army at least in case the enemy counterattacks or someone else declares war. So another point here is, what type of enemies do you have there? Do you have Skaven? Do you have underway stands? Or does the enemy have? So can you replenish well in those areas? That's the points that should increase your number of armies required, or at least you gotta have a plan to deal with those. The more allies you have surrounding an area that you're conquering, the less armies you need, but the higher increase for that chance of pocketing from your ally, the higher the chance of them picking up one settlement, and then suddenly you go like, oh, I'm gonna have to remember this when I declare war on them, because you're gonna have to conquer the whole map. You're gonna have to declare war on your allies later on. So that's something that it's a reason for a delay. Sometimes 22 more turns because of a single place. Don't let them be. Let's give an example. So over here on this Gorbad campaign, I have the Tomb Kings completely surrounded by me, and the Lizardmen completely surrounded by me, while I went on and pursued other targets. This is so typical because I was at war with Tzeentch. Tzeentch is a powerful enemy. It was giving me trouble, and I was thinking, well, I might as well just eliminate him. But don't leave the Tomb Kings and the Lizardmen back. That's a mistake, I can tell you like that. As soon as you reach these enemies, if you know that you're going to conquer the whole map, you might as well declare war if they're not too powerful. And that's always the point. Are they too powerful? If they're not, you might as well attack them. This is another pocket of the Tomb Kings. Surprisingly, they were in the wastes, of course. And Cathay, you can tell that I'm going into the middle of Cathay. Why? Because they were conquering Tretch. They were taking care of Tretch and they did a good job. So now I have to send back some armies to deal with Cathay, because they're going to betray me as soon as they have the last settlement there. So this is a big problem. Kislev. Why did I allow Kislev for so long? Because they are still, believe it or not, regardless of how many dark elves you see here, they're still strength number 2. That's why I left them for later. So sometimes it is inevitable, right? Because a bigger enemy is there, you gotta make sure you're at least gaining something in return. Now, what I'm symbolizing here in the Malakai campaign is how that Wissenland set of provinces is going to become a pocket. Why? Because I'm going to conquer everything else but them. And then suddenly I'm going to have to decide how to take care of them. Same issue here with Boris. He's completely surrounded by my forces, but I have to plan that they at one point will betray me, or that I'll have to betray them. So I have to start planning out wars against them. And how exactly do you plan wars against them? How do you go through that? It's through diplomacy. It works throughout the game. Instead of declaring war, I hope you know about the joining war. It's an example. It's a mechanic, let's say. So you got to check your alliances properly to make better decisions in this regard. Let me showcase a quick one with Malakai, the one that I used to decide who I would attack from all of my allies. Like, all of the factions that were left were kind of like neutral, small ones, or my allies. So I was like, I got to start deciding what to do. And once you see this, a lot of military alliances, you're going, I'm not going to go there. Yep, because you would have to fight everyone. But if with Avalorn, I would only fight the elves. And that feels much better. I would declare war on Avalorn, and who knows, maybe Reichland, maybe the others wouldn't even join, and I would be able to take it out. Same thing with Chevaliers. They have a mutual enemy, so I can ask Zinj, maybe force a peace, and ask Zinj for me to join the war against the other ones, against the Chevaliers, against Repunce. But then I noticed Boris. Boris was only allied to Kislev, to the Ice Court. And that's perfect. That's so perfect, because it means that I can declare war on him, and at the most, Kislev is going to react. And I can prepare for that. As you can see, I was showcasing that I had armies already prepared to conquer the places from Kislev and to at least get a better choke point against them. This is the problem, because they have some pocket locations, locations deep inside my territory. So I want to eliminate those before proceeding to their main lands. And I'm already surrounding them, preparing for the fact that they may attack me, while already having forces preparing to deal with Boris on every side. But that's the trick. One enemy at a time, you gotta prepare it. You gotta surround it, like I've just did. Take opportunities once you break their lines, but also be careful with overextending. How do you go about all this? It's difficult. It is difficult. But let me show those Kislev examples. Ready the same was with Malakai. I actually surrounded, with Boris, with all those troops. Let me go with Gorbad and see the same example as with Malakai. I'm about to declare war on Kislev. I have armies everywhere, near every single settlement. I'm already raiding, which means that a lot more income, and sometimes that means extra armies, like 2 or 3 armies. If you're with a faction that can support that for fine, yeah, go for it. So don't worry too much about the economy. Late game, it's ridiculous for any faction that I've ever fought with, but at the same time, just make sure that you are using the least amount of forces as possible. An earlier example of this is when Cathay actually declared war, and I was left with some issues. Why? Because I have no armies near here. I was actually overextending a little bit because I broke through the defenses from Balthazar Gelt, which is another threat in this area. I broke through, so I went forward, and then suddenly Cathay declared war on me. So that's a bit of a problem. Sometimes when you try to break through, you gotta use your mind, like, what happens if I break through? What happens if I go through and I just start conquering places that are ill defended? Well, other enemies may come to attack, and that's the difficult part. So, tip number 5 is to continue building. Defenses, control, corruption, gold, and then landmarks are always important. Sometimes you have a building for each, and sometimes you have a building with all of those, which is great. Like the dwarves have a building that reduces corruption, gives growth. It's excellent. It gives everything. So that's the sort of idea that I want you to have. For example, here I'm building in the minor settlements, always the income building, always the defense building, and always the control building or corruption. And always in the main faction buildings, it's fine. You can build them all. You'll have the chances for it. In addition, you'll have some of the landmarks. I'll show you them in a moment. But of course, as you can see, I'm having the corruption, the minus control, and there's no problem with that. Look at that, 100 plus 12 in terms of control. That's exactly what you want. Because in places that don't have the same climate, you're going to have those issues. And sometimes you're going to have just about enough control to do this. So as you can see, in many other minor settlements, I just went to tier 3 and built everything, and including, of course, the landmarks. And landmarks are super important, but sometimes they have early game stuff, but other times they have faction-wide stuff that it's ridiculous. Income from all buildings plus 5% faction-wide, that just... it's crazy. I think when this got built, I went from 20 surplus to 80 surplus. So what I mean by this is that sometimes you're going to see one of these landmarks, you're going to have to think, I can build 4 more armies, I can build 3 more armies, which will ease up to overwhelm the defenses of someone else. For instance, here it's more a landmark of providing benefits to specific units, which may change how you're approaching exactly the wars, right? Over here is, for instance, if you're fighting a lot of vampires. Maybe you had the vampire endgame, and this would help tremendously because of the corruption and the loss of attrition. Remember, when I said climate, is because climate was really important for replenishment of units. And when you don't have replenishment, you kind of need more armies to do the same as a couple of armies, because they're not replenishing as fast as you can. A similar example here with Dork's Rock is the control plus 2 with faction wide, and income from post-battle loot. So overall, that's an income building. That's great to have always. So of course I start with it as Gorbad, but it could be different, right? Now there is a point where it's not easy to know where you should stop building. Believe it or not, you see the map here, and you see that Reichland Kislev is still there, on the minimap. You see that I still have to fight Wissenen here. Would you believe it if I said that this is 10 turns before I fully complete the map? It is, because I have so many armies. They're going to attack everywhere, and suddenly it's like, oh, I already won? Okay. So it's difficult to tell when to stop building, because unlikely that any building would have any effect at this stage of the game. So at one point, you just have to decide, I have more than enough income, I have more than enough stuff, I'm just going to build armies and armies and armies and overwhelm the enemy and win. And that's this final push for war and to destroy the whole set of enemies that you gotta focus really well, especially in this later stage. And that takes just a lot of auto-resolve. So where is the fun factor here? So you can do a nice set of armies that are all good in auto-resolve, but you can't forget ever the fun factor. For me, the fun factor is always to develop different armies that will have different outcomes as well in auto-resolve, but at least if I want to fight those battles, I will be able to do it. Just to showcase again, I actually fought only 1/10 of the battles that were fought here. Most of the auto-resolves were like, yeah, I really don't want to have to fight all of these battles. 1,220 battles, each at like what, 10 minutes? It's already a lot of time. So you're going to have an auto-resolve fiesta, that's for sure. Just make sure that either you build armies that you want to only auto-resolve with, or that you want to just build varied armies that will still work well in auto-resolve. Like even this army works well in auto-resolve. I have some with Orc Boar Boys here just to test out. And in case you have to fight, you'll actually have some fun. Different enemies with a different army, full XP, they'll likely be full XP as well. So that's the sort of case. You can see that there's a lot of variants here that can be used, and I still achieved this on Legendary very hard, 300 turns in, with a lot of auto-resolving. So don't worry too much on doing the optimal doom stacks, because that's good for maybe a couple of turns, or maybe the early game or late game is fine. But still, if you're going for this full map completion, Maybe you want something different. And I'm just talking in terms of fun factor. Okay? If you're perfectly fine doing doom stacks, do them. If you have fun, do them. By all means, you may want to test that doom stack against every single faction in the world. Go for it. Okay? This is just if you have to, if you really wish to do this map completion, find your fun factor and capitalize on it. Like, for example, here with the dwarves, I was capitalizing on trying different combinations. Sometimes with artillery, sometimes with different guns, sometimes with different with slayer units in front. I'm not showing actually any ones with slayers. Some here with the slayers, but I have better ones. Sometimes with rangers. Sometimes with, yeah, a full army of rangers there, a full army of slayers here. See the idea with some artillery. So the more that you vary, the better the chance that sometimes you're going to have a battle that says valiant defeat. And you just fight it out and you find out that you have an army there that is just so different that you actually really like it. For that, just an advice that of course you will have all research done. And you should have invested at least in redline skills for that army. Which is why I try to avoid what I've done here, actually, where I need 4. But I was trying to go for a little bit more complex of a firepower army. In reality, the main ones should be the specific ones for the legendary lords, you know, that give something to specific units, and you capitalize on that. Or for the normal regular lords, you just go on the red line and you insist on that. You know, just a couple of skills there, and it will make a great difference in the auto-resolve later on. So to resume, tip 1, instead of goals, check the climate, check the map choke points, learn to see the map differently. Decide how many armies for map areas and adapt to the enemy. Plan to avoid those pockets of allies or neutral factions. Just declare war on that neutral faction and see how you can declare war on that neutral faction before engaging in that area of the map. Adapt to the enemy means, hey, is this Skaven? Make sure that you have some ambush defense possibilities there. Maybe some more armies so that if you get ambushed, you can still continue and don't lose momentum. Momentum is really important here. Now, tip 3, diplomacy. Works throughout the game. You want to declare war, you ask to join. Make sure, I abuse this so much. Check the alliances. Number 4, one enemy at a time. Prepare for it, surround, take opportunities once you break their lines and care with the overextension. Tip number 5, continue building. Defenses, control, corruption, gold, you have to take care of all of that. And tip number 6, auto-resolve, but have fun as well. Now, these are some tips in terms of mechanical that I couldn't really go into anything else. Notice, what I'm going to notice is that you can order here in the panel, sort by action points. So you can see, for instance, the armies that have already moved and just go in and move the ones that you haven't moved. And this is a much better way to see, oh, I still have some armies that haven't moved, because when you get to 20 plus, you're going to have that issue. Similar the way with the settlements that provide the most income. Notice that the ones that are providing the most income in my campaign are actually ones in unpleasant climate. It's not uninhabitable, of course, but unpleasant, it's still nice. So you can go by income and realize where you should be focusing your building efforts. Unless you're like me and you're super filthy rich, at this point, of course, you might want to avoid building on the full corruption places, which of course you can already immediately see here because those are the ones that are giving no money. So pop this up, build on the provinces that already have the best money, and that's where you should invest your money overall. Thank you very much for watching. I hope this helps, and may you conquer until you cannot conquer any longer. Good day.